Everyone tells you to remove toxic people from your life. Pastors say it. Self-help books say it. Entire YouTube channels are built on it. 7 signs someone is toxic. 5 types of people God wants you to cut off. 3 ways to know when it is time to walk away. And most of the time, it feels right. It feels wise. It feels like something God would endorse. But there is one question that almost nobody in those conversations ever asks, and it is the one that matters most. What if the toxic person in the room is you? Not as a guilt trip, not as some kind of spiritual self-harm, as a genuine question. Because in the last video, we talked about silence, God's silence, and what it might actually mean. Today, it is about a different kind of silence, the things we do not say to ourselves, the version of ourselves we have never looked at honestly, not because we cannot, but because we are afraid of what we might find. Here is a story. A few years ago, someone lost 3 close friendships in the span of about 18 months. Different people, different circumstances, different reasons, and every time the explanation was the same: they were toxic. God removed them. It was necessary. And then one night, alone, quiet, no one to perform for, a thought showed up that would not leave. What if the common factor in all 3 of those situations was not them? What if it was me? That thought is terrifying, because it dismantles the most comfortable story we tell ourselves. The story goes like this: I am good. The people who hurt me are the problem. And when they leave, or when I push them out, it is God cleaning house. It is protection. It is growth. And sometimes, genuinely, it is. There are relationships that need to end. There are people who manipulate, who drain, who use faith as a weapon. That is real, and it matters. But, and this is where it gets uncomfortable, not every broken relationship is their fault. Sometimes the boundaries we set are not about protection. They are about avoidance. About not having to look at the parts of ourselves that contributed to the damage. The internet has turned the word toxic into a tool. You can label almost anyone toxic if you frame it right. Your friend who asked a hard question, toxic. Your parent who expressed disappointment, toxic. Your coworker who gave honest feedback, toxic. The word is supposed to mean something, but it has been stretched so thin that it now covers anything that makes us uncomfortable. And discomfort is not the same thing as danger. And here is where faith makes it worse, not better. Because when you add God to the equation, the label becomes unchallengeable. It is no longer just, I do not want this person around. It becomes, God is removing them. And once God is the author of the decision, questioning it feels like questioning God, which means nobody pushes back. Nobody says, wait, are you sure? Nobody asks, is it possible that this person was not toxic? They were just honest and you did not want to hear it? Think about how many times you have heard someone say, I had to let them go. God was showing me they were not meant for this season. And maybe that was true. But maybe in some of those cases, what actually happened was a hard conversation that nobody wanted to have. A moment of friction that could have been growth. And instead of sitting in the tension, the label came out. Toxic. And the door closed, not because it needed to, but because closing it was easier than opening yourself up. There is a pattern here that is worth paying attention to. When the same kind of conflict keeps showing up with different people, in different years, in different churches, in different friendships, at some point, the question stops being what is wrong with everyone around me and starts becoming what is it inside me that keeps producing this result? That is not a fun question, but it might be the most important one. There is a verse in Matthew chapter 7, verses 3 through 5, that has become one of the most quoted passages in Christian culture. Most people know the image, the speck in your brother's eye and the plank in your own. And it is usually used to mean, do not judge others. Stop criticizing. Mind your own business. But that is only half of what Jesus said. The other half is harder. What most people do not consider is the context. This was part of the Sermon on the Mount, the same teaching where Jesus said, love your enemies and turn the other cheek. He was talking to a crowd of ordinary people who were absolutely convinced they were the righteous ones. They were the faithful, the obedient, the ones who kept the law. And Jesus, instead of confirming that identity, kept turning it around. You think you are righteous? Check your anger. You think you are pure? Check your thoughts. You think you see clearly? Check your own eye first. The entire sermon is a mirror. And most people treat it like a window, something to look through at other people's problems. He said, first, take the plank out of your own eye. First, before you address the other person, before you offer correction, before you even begin to evaluate someone else's behavior, deal with yours. And the word he used for plank was not small. It was a beam, a construction beam, the kind of piece you would use to hold up a roof. He was saying, you are walking around with a structural support beam sticking out of your face, trying to perform surgery on someone else's splinter. And you do not even see it. The image is almost absurd. And that is the point. It is supposed to make you stop and think, am I really seeing clearly right now, or am I just seeing what confirms what I already believe about myself? Now, the part most people miss. Jesus did not say ignore the speck. He did not say the other person has no issues. He said deal with yourself first, which means the work of seeing clearly starts inward. It starts with the willingness to ask, what am I contributing to this mess? Where am I the one being defensive, avoidant, manipulative, controlling, dismissive? Where am I using spiritual language to justify something that has nothing to do with God? That question is the one nobody wants to sit with. Because the moment you turn the mirror around, the comfortable categories collapse. You are no longer the victim. You're no longer the righteous one who had to walk away from darkness. You are a person, a complicated, flawed person who might have caused pain without realizing it. Or worse, while telling yourself you were doing the right thing. There's a phrase people use in faith circles, God is removing people from your life. And sometimes, maybe. But sometimes what happened is simpler and harder. You pushed someone away because they saw something in you that you did not want to see. You called it a boundary, but it was a wall. And behind that wall is not peace, it is the version of yourself you have been running from. Nathan almost did not write this one. Because talking about toxic people from the outside is easy. Everybody agrees, everybody nods, nobody feels threatened. But talking about the possibility that you might be the problem, that is the video most people will click away from. And the fact that you are still here says something. There is a man, a real person, not a biblical character, who spent 2 years telling everyone that his small group at church had become toxic. The leader was controlling. The members were judgmental. He left, found a new group. Within 8 months, the same thing. Controlling leader, judgmental members. He left again. And then a friend, a real friend, the kind who does not just agree with you, said something that stopped him cold. What if the problem is not the groups? What if the problem is that you do not know how to be in a group without trying to control it yourself? That sentence sat in his chest for weeks. Because it was true. Not completely true. Some of those people genuinely were difficult. But the pattern, the consistent, repeating pattern, was not about them. It was about something he had never looked at. Here is what this is not. This is not about beating yourself up. This is not about guilt or shame or deciding that every conflict in your life was your fault. That is just the other extreme, and it is just as dishonest. What this is about is a willingness to look, to sit across from yourself at the table and ask, am I being honest right now? About this relationship? About why it ended? About what my role was? Not to punish yourself. To know yourself, because you cannot grow past what you refuse to see. Jesus did not say take the plank out of your eye as punishment. He said it so you could see clearly, so you could actually love the other person, not from a place of superiority, but from a place of having done your own work first. The whole point of the plank is not guilt, it is clarity. And clarity is expensive. It costs you the story you have been telling about yourself. There is a difference between someone who says, I set a boundary and means it, and someone who says, I set a boundary but actually means I did not want to have that conversation. Both look the same from the outside. Both sound spiritual. Both get affirmed by everyone around you, but only one of them leads somewhere honest. And the other one just leads back to the same pattern with a different person in a different year with the same result. So here's the invitation. Not to feel guilty, not to go apologize to everyone you have ever cut off, but to pause, to sit with the question, is there a version of me that I have not been willing to look at? Is there a pattern I keep explaining away? Is there a plank I have been calling a splinter, or worse, calling someone else's fault? You do not have to answer that tonight, but it is worth holding. Because the hardest and most freeing thing a person can do is stop looking for the toxic person in the room and start asking, what kind of person am I becoming? And if that stirred something in you, next time, something practical, for those nights when you sit down to pray and nothing comes, not motivation, not a list, just a way through the silence,